Welcome to the 8th episode of the Michigan Sports Analytics Podcast. I'm your host, Jake Grossman. Let's get started. Today, we will be talking about a few different analytics metrics that have been created here by Joseph Hefner. We're first going to start with our stat of the week. It's a QB accuracy metric that he put together that I thought was really really interesting way of looking at an ability of a quarterback to deliver catchable balls to their receivers and how often they do so, and a way to really quantify accuracy in a way that's traditionally been difficult to do with advanced stats. Then we're going to go into some recent news. We're going to talk about the Chiefs, where Joseph has certain expertise and will be able to give us his insights on where he thinks that how the Chiefs are situated compared to their seasons past and whether they can do it again in terms of a Super Bowl. And then finally, we're going to pivot into our main topic conversation, where we're going to talk about some of the penalty-based analytics that Joseph has put together, but looking at both procedural type stuff and then some of the more luck-based metrics that go into it. And then we're also just going to talk about some of the really cool tools that he's put together that are available online that you can use to just sort of either visualize different things with respect to football or even try to understand things in a deeper way. So I've made a great use of those, and he's certainly one of my favorite follows on Twitter. So Joseph, do you want to just take a chance to maybe just introduce yourself, describe your background in football and analytics and all of that?
Yeah, absolutely. So as you mentioned, I'm an avid Chiefs fan. Been watching Chiefs since I was born in Kansas, so I grew up with it. I've never not been watching the Chiefs. Went through a lot of very, very rough years with the Chiefs there, and now it's all paying off. Yep.
As a Jets fan, I hope that's how it works for everyone. Yeah.
Oh, this is a rough season to be a Jets fan. It's the hope that kills you.
No, but keep going. Yeah, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Oh yeah. So I currently do some contract work with Kansas City Sports Network. I do weekly articles with them. I create graphics that they share, I do that. I do some freelance work for Fantasy Points as well, and sometimes for FTN as well, FTN data.
Right. Those are great. Those are great sites. They have such a great amount of just tools available in terms of just resources for advanced stats that are otherwise pretty difficult to come by in a lot of ways.
Yeah, they really do. We're in such a good moment right now with how many stats are available and trackable from different companies. And you don't have to spend stupid money to get access to all of it. Like it used to be PFF was it. PFF and Pro Football Reference. And that was it. That was, if it wasn't there or if you didn't have the $300 a month subscription to PFF, that's it. That's all you got. And now there's just so much data that's out there. It's really wonderful time to be working in football analytics. So as for my background in football analytics, so none of my education is anything even tangentially related to computer science, programming, coding, data visualization, nothing like that. I started doing football analytics in 2019 when I was on Twitter and I would see these posts being made by Ben Baldwin or Josh Hermsmeyer, Timo Riske, PFF Move from
Right.
on Twitter. And then I started seeing this NFL scraper team show up. And I thought that's really interesting, and I'm interested in doing stuff like that. So I started doing just a little bit. Like they have some guides and stuff available on their website. They didn't even have a website back then. It was just GitHub articles or opensourcefootball.com.
Right. No, I've dove into a couple of those open source football articles just because I was like, often it's has anyone done this yet? But it's also sometimes just if I want to do something on top of something, a lot of the time it's already been done, at least in a similar way.
It's often been done. And one of the beautiful things about the R community, the coding community for NFL analytics, is that a lot of people will just put their code open on GitHub, and you can just go to anybody's GitHub and pull random code to do any number of different things. And even though it's all open and available, like I have once had somebody just completely steal my code and post it as though it was theirs. At least that I've seen.
That's not ideal. And you never you want to see that. And I think attribution, even in like it doesn't hurt in any way. Like no one looks at an attribution and goes like, oh, this guy didn't do anything. So it's one of those things where it's like the easiest thing to do, and yet you fail to see it so often. Even just like people who download the pictures and then will repost them as their own, just like, oh, look at this. And it's just like, it would have been a lot quicker to just quote tweet.
Yep. Yeah. Just quote tweet. Like, I don't understand people's reticence against quote tweeting. Like they would much rather just take the photo and CC you in the tweet or, whatever. And I just like, why not just quote tweet? But that's especially how the bigger accounts handle it. So just how it goes.
Absolutely. I was going to ask, what was your background prior to football analytics? What was your sort of like educational background or anything? Just out of curiosity now.
I have a degree in theology.
Interesting.
Yes, very interesting. I do not use that degree. I have never used that degree in my professional life. Don't plan to, but yeah, that was.
I would argue you might be with the penalty research, but we'll get to that.
Buddy, that's a whole can of worms right there, buddy. So I started doing that when when it was still NFL Scraper, and then they got Ben Baldwin, Tan Ho, John on board, and it became the NFL Faster first, and then just the NFL Verse, where they just exploded, and they have just so much data that it's available. And I just want to give a big shout outs to those guys. Like I knew nothing when I started doing this, but I would post things occasionally, and all of those guys were so willing to volunteer their time and their efforts to give advice, help me through coding problems. Like I've never met any of them in person, but they've just been incredibly generous with their own time and expertise, and it's just had a major influence on the analyst that I am today. I have people reach out to me sometimes now, and whenever they do, I always try to give my absolute best possible feedback, help if they need it, and whatever. And that's largely because that's what I received, and I want that to be part of this community.
No, absolutely. I feel like that's been something that I've definitely experienced as someone like you just sort of like recently ventured into this space where it's like very welcoming in terms of people like who just want you to like who are like happy to share like so many of the resources that they use, how they sort of went about learning some of the skills that they have, sharing code, as you said, in context, like in terms of online and methodology for solving problems that I find so what's the word for it? It's heartening, but there's another word for it. It's just like it's refreshing, I think, is what it is, in that it's like just such like a welcoming space for people who are just like, because there's only a niche few of us who get so excited and interested in this stuff. But you're right that it's really exploding, and I feel like a lot of like at least one of the driving forces beyond for me starting this podcast in the first place with MFans and all the stuff that we're doing there's just so much cool work being done in the football analytics space that we realistically could do an episode every week on just a new cool thing that someone had done, and we would just never run out of content because there really is just that much like stuff just coming out from really just anyone with an internet connection. And that's what's really incredible about it, I think, is and then also the organized stuff like big data balls, of course, great. But
big data ball is fantastic.
Right. And like all the sort of insights that they like offering in the resources there are incredible. But I just think just sort of the ability for anyone to sort of get involved in this is certainly a really awesome thing.
Yeah, it really is. And all of the helps and stuff, they do have a website now, and there's so many like introduction to play-by-play, introduction to, here's how you download R and RStudio and get it set up on your computer, which isn't even like NFL related. It's just like, here's how you would get started first, and then here's the data and what you can do with it.
No, yeah, for a non-computer person, like that idea of just even getting like the ability, like that, like programming, like sort of like Studio on your computer is like kind of imposing. Like,
yeah,
it
it's a
makes
big
sense.
step. It's such a big step, and it's so. Like you said, if you're not like a major computer person, like I have no idea how to fix my computer if it goes down or command line interface, any of that. And there's so much of that that's necessary when you try to install programs or, your coding IDE. And so to have a simple guide from the NFLverse team, here's how you do it. Here's packages that you'll need. Here's everything wrapped up in a nice bundle. It's really cool to have.
Yeah, I've also found like obviously like MFans, we have like a bunch of resources from some of our previous members like Seth. I just want to give it a shout out on the on our podcast, just so like you couldn't find those on YouTube if you're listening, and those for me were really helpful when I was just sort of getting back, because I had like done like a statistics like taking a lot of courses and then didn't end up finishing the major, so I sort of just was getting back into it mostly in like the capacity with like the professional basketball work I do, but then found that like a really helpful resource for trying to get into the football stuff, because I just didn't really have a lot of familiarity with how to find public data and things like that. Yeah. So I found those resources great. And Eric Eager's book also I found really helpful, just in terms of just like, oh, how would I go about doing this? In a lot of ways, it's just like, it solves a lot of that like time you would spend researching the internet, looking for an answer, which at least ChatGPT has solved a little bit, but not to the same extent when you're looking for something very specific.
Right, exactly.
Okay, I think this is a good time for us to pivot into our stat of the week. So we're going to be talking about your QB accuracy metric that you posted online. Do you want to explain it a little bit before I just maybe ask you a couple of questions about it?
Yeah, absolutely. So the data. So I started posting this graphic last year. FTN Data had released some charting data to the NFLverse for free, which was absolutely incredible. I'd done all of the stuff when they first released it. I had a million ideas. I did those million ideas at the beginning of the season, pumped out a whole bunch of content, had a whole bunch of ideas, and then I was like, I'm out of ideas. All right, I've done what I immediately thought of, and now I'm just like searching for inspiration, right? And so when that happens, I'll often just look at a data set and just kind of scroll through until I see a data item that I think is interesting. And so I was scrolling through FTN's data because that was the new data. I saw catchable, and I thought, this is interesting. I should do something with this. I don't know what I want to do with it, and so I brought up the data and started playing with it. I did 100 different things with it, right? Like I looked at, okay, so this is catchable. What is catchable EPA, catchable deep, catchable by down or quarter, and just cycled through a whole bunch of different things that I could do with it until I finally settled on catchable and completion probability as what I wanted to do. And so this stat, it takes, so FTN charts every throw that a quarterback makes and charts it as, is it catchable or not? So just a simple yes, no, catchable or not. So if it's thrown at a wide receiver's feet, they've got no shot at it, that's not catchable. If it's thrown, but it's, behind them, they'd have to, reach back to grab it. Well, probably catchable. Might be difficult, but catchable, right? And then
catchable
also
is a binary here. It's not like a catch probability.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's binary. There's some gray there where like how far can they reach, wingspan might matter here, or defender makes a great play on the ball and rips it out of their hands or whatever. Like there's some extra added context to here that a binary yes, no absolutely can't capture. But I do think that catchable can be a solid proxy for accuracy over a large sample size. So I started playing with just catchable, and I turned it into how often does a quarterback throw a ball that is catchable. And so I'd see some high numbers and some lower numbers, and I'm like, that's interesting. These are some names here that I didn't expect. And I realized that like average depth of target is a really big factor in catchability of a ball, right? Or not in catchability, but in difficulty of a throw. So a quarterback that throws a lot of deep balls, you would expect to have a lower catchable ball rate.
In the aggregate, it'll affect catchability, not in like it doesn't necessarily mean that it's a less catchable ball just because it's from farther. It's going to be, as you said, a more difficult throw on average. If you're
so Josh Allen, especially prior to this season, where he's been kind of the dink and bomb king, where he dinks it off 3 yards or he bombs it 30. But he's a good example of somebody who just chucks it deep, right? Fantastic quarterback. He's good at all phases of quarterbacking. I'm not saying that he's only a deep ball merchant, but he's fantastic at the deep ball. And he will just throw the deep ball no matter what. Just fearless. He could have thrown 5 interceptions and he'll still throw that next deep ball.
Right. Part of what makes him so good, to be fair.
Exactly. Yeah, it does. Yeah, you've got to take chances. And hey, if you can win those chances more often than not, that's the best way to play. Or at least it's a great way to play. But anyway, so catchable rate by itself doesn't give context to like how is this an impressive number or not. And so I looked first at average depth of target, because as we're saying, like depth of target has a huge factor in how accurate a quarterback is expected to be. If you're, 60% accurate on deep balls, that's fantastic. If you're 60% accurate on screens, ooh, buddy, you should probably be replaced. And so first I looked at average depth of target, but then I realized that the NFL-verse has a completion probability model that incorporates average depth of target as a major component, but it also incorporates a whole bunch of other factors such as just game details. It's like depth of target, down and distance, game time, passes to the middle of the field or not, because middle of the field is less likely to be caught, whether the QB was hit, other things like that. So
I feel like that makes it a metric that you can sort of like rely upon. Like we're not talking about like CPOE where it has a strong amount of influence from wide receivers is sort of been a lot of the, I feel like criticism there. When you're talking about just expected completion percentage, you still have like a little bit of that because there's like, the options available to you are still based on, somewhat based on scheme and the ability of your receivers in terms of at least like that expected completion percentage number. But that's why the marriage of the two is so awesome because you're sort of contextualizing for that.
Exactly, and that's exactly what it is. Like ADOT provides good context, but completion probability is ADOT on steroids as far as context goes, right? So also average depth of target. With completion probability, that's a percentage probability, so it's already built on a 1 to 100 or 0 to 1 scale, right? Which catchable rate is also built on, which makes math between the two super simple. If I'm just doing by average depth of target, I'm probably just listing catchable and then average depth of target as the context. With this, I can create a plus minus metric, which is what the catchable over completion probability, the metric that I came up with is. But it just takes your catchable rate minus your completion probability rate. And then if your catchable rate is higher than your completion probability rate, then you are more accurate than the average quarterback is expected to be in your game situations. And if it's lower, then you are less accurate.
But yeah, that's like, I feel like a really awesome, like I thought this was super awesome when I saw it. It sort of just struck true with me in a lot of ways in terms of just like, because I think the simplicity with which the calculation sort of forms, like there's no sort of way you have to think like, oh, like, does that make sense? Like, no, it's a catchable ball. And then it's how hard was the throw? And it sort of just computes very nicely. Now, considering that, was there anything about the results that struck you as a surprise? At least for the results for this year, for sure. I was wondering.
Yeah, so I haven't run it for this week yet, but last week I posted it, and for the first time this year, because you need a large enough sample size for it to make sense. And Will Levis is 6th on the chart. He's got a plus 7.1% over his completion probability percent. That's stupidly good. He's tied with Justin Herbert. Nobody watching those two play thinks that they are in any way similar, not even a little bit. Like nobody thinks that Levis is as good as Justin Herbert.
No.
And on the other hand, your most accurate quarterback is Joe Burrow, and your least accurate quarterback is Anthony Richardson. And those are, if you queried 100 people, 80 of them are going to list those two as the most and least accurate quarterbacks in the NFL this year, I think.
Right. I think that's a fair estimate. And I think that's probably just, that's certainly, the old Darnold Mahomes sort of test of like, if you have Mahomes in the top right and Darnold in the bottom left, it's probably a good stat. I feel like
right.
In terms of accuracy, that's a similarly good sort of heuristic to look at it through.
Yeah. And these sort of like outliers, they're really common when we look at a very specific metric like this, because it is measuring one thing and one thing only. And there's so much about football that's interconnected, and you just can't separate one from the other. Like this hyperfixates on QB accuracy and does it through the use of two separate stats. And I think, generally speaking, it's a very good methodology. But no matter what methodology you use, no matter what you're doing here, anytime you try to apply one methodology to everybody in the NFL, it's not going to work for everybody, right? It's just not.
I was going to say, I was going to ask, is there anything that in context of that you might do to like adjust this methodology sort of going forward, like that you think like, oh, if I accounted for that, or there's just like things that you've sort of thought of like, oh, there might be sort of like just always trying to iterate and build a slightly better mousetrap kind of thing.
Right. Yeah, I do actually. So some things that this metric just doesn't take into account, the quality of the team, quality of coaching, like an Andy Reid or a Ben Johnson, fantastic offenses, right? They get their players open. They make their job. They make their quarterbacks and wide receivers' jobs as easy as possible. Versus other teams where it's much more difficult to find an open receiver, or just bad schemes, right? Like say the Jets. But this. So this doesn't take coaching into effect. It doesn't take quarterback decision-making into effect. It takes quarterback hits into effect, but not QB pressure. It doesn't take into effect, is the quarterback running at the time of throw? Also for the accuracy metric, when you're looking at specifically like Levis and Herbert, catchable, as I mentioned, is binary. So Herbert generally just directly teleports the balls from his hands to his receivers' hands, just directly with nothing in between, whereas other quarterbacks tends to throw the ball. And so a throw that is perfectly placed exactly where it needs to be, like Herbert does, is rated as catchable, but so is a catch that is behind a receiver who's running across the middle, about to be absolutely blown up by a safety because his quarterback is leading him into a defender. But that ball is still within reach and he reaches his hands back and he touches that ball and it's catchable. But those throws are very different. So that's the problem with a binary. Is it catchable?
Right. And I can't remember if the metric takes into account the location of the nearest defender on the play.
It does not.
Right.
No.
And I wonder if using, like, I do believe that there are other completion probability models that do. So now I'm just curious, like, how that would change the results, if at all. It might not, because I think we might overrate the extent to which these models differ. I know I plotted them out at one point last year, but I haven't looked at it this year to see which players it's diverging on. But it's certainly interesting to think about.
Yeah, if we had tracking data, this could certainly be a lot better of a metric. Because like closest defender, location of that defender in front of or behind, beside the receiver. Opponent adjustments are something else that I think would add extra context to this, like completion probability and catchable. Neither of them are going to take into account whether you're facing the incredibly awful 2018 Chiefs defense that gave up 50 points a game, or it's the 1985 Bears defense or the 2007 Ravens, right? Like completion probability only cares about down and difference, depth of target, and the other factors. It doesn't care about the opponent.
Yeah, query whether that's and this is an interesting question that I'm not sure I have a good answer to. If you have enough tracking data, is the opponent quality going to add much is a good question, because you could convince me both sides, right? That like if you have enough tracking data, then theoretically all the things that would account for how good the opponent should be sort of at least mostly, brought in. But then you could convince me that, well, having a defender near the receiver when you're going against the Legion of Boom Seahawks is a lot more meaningful than when you're going against, like, I don't know, what's a team with terrible
the Panthers.
The Panthers, great.
Right. They're playing the Panthers this upcoming week. Nobody's scared of the Panthers, right? Like nobody's scared of that. They're not scared of being blown up in the middle. That is a team that is largely given up, right? And I think that like there's a difference in quality there, but I think there's the differences, like you were pointing out, like a difference in mentality there. Like you do not want to be running across the middle against the Ravens, right? You just don't.
And there's a selection bias there then built into the play calling. That's like
exactly, yeah. And anytime you're doing a highly selective stats like this, like selection bias is going to matter a lot. There's going to be some mental things there, like we were just talking about, and there's always going to be so much extra context that's not being brought in. Like even though I'm using a much more contextual stat like completion probability instead of just ADOT, there's still all this other stuff that can be brought in.
Fascinating. I think this is a good time for us to move on into our conversation about the Chiefs. So obviously the perfect season is over. It's almost in some ways that takes the pressure off. I want to hear, before we sort of go into, where they're sort of situated as a team in the, course of this, long season, what do you think about the game this week?
Yeah, so number one, I want to say most teams do this, but I follow the Chiefs, and so the Chiefs absolutely do this. We almost always lose to some most ridiculous team one time in the year, like what was it, the 2020 Colts?
That's the classic one, because Mahomes had never really had a bad game before that, so I think it was so jarring for everyone that they even like
everything goes wrong, like blocked field goals, missed field goals, dumb interceptions, unbelievably dumb interceptions, just bizarre things, right? But this happens to us consistently. Like we lost to the Raiders last year on Christmas Day. I hate playing on Christmas so much. Just an awful loss, and embarrassing loss, right? So there is a big part of me, like I never thought we were going to go undefeated this season. That's just, it doesn't happen, right? It just doesn't happen. So I didn't ever really believe that we were going to go undefeated this season. And I am so very glad that a quality team beat us and not, say, the Panthers, beat us this upcoming week, because like if we had beat the Bills and we're 10-0 this week, like, you know, big celebrations like, yeah, we just beat the second best team in the AFC here, you know, undefeated team, here we go. And
Feeling
then
good about the 1 seed,
Panthers,
yeah.
yep, and then just completely overlook the Panthers this upcoming week. Like, that would happen to us. It would absolutely happen to us, and it would be just embarrassing, so embarrassing. So losing to a quality team, I wish it hadn't been the Bill. I wish the Bills had more losses, so the 1 seed was still more likely. But them having the only being 1 game behind us and having the tiebreaker now is frustrating. I kind of would have rather lost to the Ravens or the Broncos the week before. But yeah, I am glad that it wasn't an embarrassing loss to an embarrassing team. So
I was are you at all nervous about like the defense? Like, I feel like the defense has kind of been really strong all year, and that performance just, I feel like, could give me pause. I mean, I feel like you have to have faith in Spags because he's more than earned it. But I feel like I did want to ask that because Allen they look to be able to kind of create whatever they wanted in a way that could be a little scary.
Yeah, they did. So in the offense, we traded L'Jarius Sneed to the Titans. He was our number 1 cornerback. That promoted our first round pick, McDuffie, up to number 1 cornerback, and he's been good. But we didn't bring in anybody to replace Sneed. So everybody on the depth chart just got bumped up a slot, right? That hadn't been a problem earlier in the season when Jalen Watson was playing as the number 2 cornerback, but he broke his ankle a couple of weeks ago, and it's been jarring how much worse the defense has looked without him playing. Like him being out there allowed McDuffie to slide into the slot on in our nickel and dime packages, where
he thrived last year, to be fair.
Yeah, where he thrived last year. He's been good on the outside, but he's a good outside cornerback. He's a great slot cornerback.
That's probably true about Snead too, to be honest.
It might be. But having both of them being able to play outside meant that they could mix and match. But now we lost one of our outside cornerbacks, and so now McDuffie's just always outside. So that slightly lowers McDuffie, and it's been jarring how much worse the number 3 and 4 cornerbacks have been. And that's our pass rush was never particularly fast, but our pass coverage was good enough that they were able to get there and wreak havoc earlier in the season. And the last 2 or 3 games, it just hasn't been as good. So yeah, the defense does worry me, and we're not bringing in a new cornerback. Like what we've got is what we've got. So the Bills, I mean, it's against Josh Allen. He's going to do what he wants, right? He's an incredible quarterback. No defense is just going to stop him if he's having a good day. So that does worry me a bit. I don't think that the Chiefs showed anything in this game that I learned that was new, that aren't problems that we've already seen crop up. It's just every other week, the offensive line issues, the number 2 cornerback issues, the vulnerability to the deep ball, the lack of ability to overcome negative plays on our offense, on our very dink and dunk offense. All of that stuff all came together at once in this game, where it hasn't mattered as much. Not all of those flaws have shown up in our other games, where in this game it did, and we were playing a team that is a very quality team and took advantage of it. And credit to the Bills for going for it on that 4th and 2. Like, if they don't get that 4th and 2, the Chiefs only need a field goal to win outright. They could have just kicked a field goal there to go up 5, and we'd need a touchdown. And that would have been a really good decision to make. But instead, they decided we've gone through a 13 seconds playoff game where we thought we had this won, and the Chiefs came back and they thought we're either going to win or we're going to lose this game. We're not going to let Pat decide. And
Right.
they
I do
won.
believe that was a decision that the analytics did favor a go there by a pretty strong margin. I want to check the exact numbers, but I do believe it was in support of that 4th and 2 call. Yeah, it had it as a 7.1% go recommendation, which is well beyond the margin of error on those sorts of things in terms of the 4th down thing.
Honestly, I'm surprised it's that low. Because like getting a first down, converting the 4th, getting a first down allows them to run out the clock and then kick the field goal. Like they don't need a touchdown at that point. They can just, because we'd already burned our timeouts. So that was largely a win condition right there. So, and instead, Mr. Buffalo just rumbles in for a touchdown and all right, I guess that was, the Chiefs have done that a whole bunch of times. I guess I know what it feels like to have your heart ripped out there. Thank you.
And I'm sure that game was nothing more than a preview for another one of those brilliant games that we'll get to see between them and let them just sort of show off in the playoffs. I certainly hope we get to see that game in January.
Yep, exactly. Now, hey, fun stat here. The Chiefs and Bills have played 7 times over the past 4 years, which is almost division rival rate.
Right.
So 4 of those games have been in the regular season. The Bills have won all 4 of them. 3 of them have been in the postseason, and the Chiefs have won all 3 of them.
That's probably not a stat anyone who likes the Bills wants to hear, but that is an awesome number right there.
It is probably also not a stat with any predictive quality whatsoever.
No, not at all.
But look, I'm coping, man. I'm coping.
No, I don't think that's the kind of thing where I would attribute much predictive value to it whatsoever. I just think it's one of those more descriptive, that's tough for the Bills, because you can win these games every year, and then you just proceed to, unfortunately for the Bills fans, I guess, depending on where you shake out on who you root for in those games, unfortunately for them, it just has not worked out, and the variance has not sort of gone their way in any of these incredibly close playoff games. Now, before we move on from the Chiefs, I did want to ask, do you feel like this team is out as well situated as it was in the last 2 years, or do you feel like this team has a little bit more holes to it and you don't feel as confident? I mean, I know last year's Chiefs team, it wasn't looked at as this world beater, but I am interested in your perspective.
Yeah, let me tell you, last year's Chiefs team looked rough. It looked bad. We had culminating in the Christmas Day loss to the Raiders. It was just, we had 6 losses on the season already, and it just looked brutal. I did not think that we were going to do it. I thought a first-round exit was likely, to be honest. If we didn't get a good matchup, I thought a first-round exit was likely. And instead, we went from Christmas Day to Sunday without a loss.
That's actually an incredible number right there. That I didn't realize that when we were talking about this Raiders loss, that is the last time before Sunday they lost a game, and that's incredible. But also, I've watched I think 8 losses already this year. It's a little hard to hear. That's awesome though. I do think that's a really fair point. Last year's Chiefs team was certainly not the team that a lot of people were picking to win the Super Bowl. But I think the Bayesian in me would say Patrick Mahomes, that's really enough said to know that team should have a shot as long as they're there.
Yeah, and as far as the rest of the season goes, even with the loss to the Bills, the Chiefs still have the inside track to the 1 seed. They've got the tiebreaker, but we still have fewer losses than them. Our end of season schedule, it's not a cakewalk, but it's not brutal either. We've got Houston left. We've got the Steelers left. Other than that, it's mostly just division rivals. And division games are always weird, but so I would expect another loss or 2. That's probably also true of the Bills. So So like I say, it's not a cakewalk, but it's not brutal.
Yeah, I mean, I would say like the Bills, the Bills have the 49ers and the Lions, but they also get, the Patriots twice and the Jets. So it'll be, I think that'll be fun to follow throughout the end of the season. It's going to come down to the Chiefs, I think, winning those divisional games, the game against the Texans, the game against the Steelers. It's some real matchups there that will let us know where they're at. Maybe, though, because I don't know if we should be looking to Christmas Day outcomes for the Chiefs and saying that's who they are, because they've shown us they can turn it. So I think counting out Patrick Mahomes in the playoffs, pretty much no matter what we see between now and then, if he's there, I don't think anyone's going to be looking at the matchup with the Chiefs as anything other than the sort of most important game that they will have in their run to trying to get to the Super Bowl.
Yeah, and we have several players that are going to be coming back, getting healthy. Like Juju came back from a hamstring injury this week. Isaiah Pacheco, he's back from IR. He'll probably suit up this week. So he's back. Charles Omenihu, same thing. So he'll provide some extra pass rushing snaps for us. He'll immediately slot in as the second best defensive end after George Karlaftis.
I was like, that was a good correction there. I was like thinking about it. I was like, okay, like, yeah, but you hadn't finished the thought yet, so I didn't know.
Yeah. No, I was thinking. I was saying pass rusher, but thinking edge. No, Chris Jones, George Karlaftis, those are probably the best. But Omenihu, he's pretty good at rushing the passer. So that'll help our room. We got reports this week that Hollywood Brown, who got injured in the first preseason game, his first catch of the first preseason game, he might be back in the next few weeks, probably by Christmas. So that's pretty cool. That'll help our offense quite a bit. Jalen Watson, our number 2 cornerback, who broke his ankle, he could come back this season. Broken ankle has a little bit of a disparity in comeback time, so he might be out for the season, but he could be back. He could be here, especially if we make it late into the postseason like we do. So there's several players that will be getting back that can provide some extra added juice down the stretch.
For sure. No, that's that. I don't think that that's like when we say the Chiefs can't make any additions, they are going to be making additions just by virtue of players getting healthy. Although by the same token, it's a reasonable expectation that there will be injuries between now and then too that they will also have to account for. So hopefully things are looking up in that sense, but we'll just have to see how the gods let that one play out. And I think that is a good segue into our main topic discussion for today's podcast, which is going to start with the penalty research that Joseph has done that I found just like sort of like the gospel in the vein of like that tweet that was going around, frankly, all offseason of Patrick Mahomes has like 53 interceptions called back by penalty. The next most was like, it was either 7 or 7.
I was going to bring this up as the inspiration for this specific graphic. Yes.
Because it was inane. It was so like, it was driving me crazy, but like, I didn't have I don't know, I guess I just didn't have the time, didn't have the motivation to go do it. And I was so glad. I remember like I saw you post it. I was like, I just commented like, thank you. Like, thank you for someone doing this and getting the correct number out there, because it was driving me absolutely up a wall to see that.
And like, honestly, respects to the guy for just coming up with such an absurd number. Like, what was it? 53, 57 interceptions called back by penalty. Like,
and the next most was like 17 or something. It was like, it was insane.
Right. Yep. When the reality is like, in the off season, I haven't run it for this season, but like Mahomes does lead the league in interceptions called back by penalties with 17, I think it was. But the next highest is 16, and Mahomes has thrown like oh God, I wish I had the stat in front of me, but he's thrown like 2,000 more passes than the number 16 player, right?
I
Like
remember it
this
was
is
like on a
this
rate
is
basis.
nothing
He
more than
wasn't
a
even.
rate stat,
Yeah.
right? Like, but also he's had 16 touchdowns called back by penalty as well, right? Which also leads the league. Like if he's NFL's golden boy, like make up your mind. Like it's a little bit of snip snap here. Like like either give us the interceptions and the touchdowns, or don't give us either. But you're being just completely. You're just not being consistent, NFL, if you're trying to help us out.
Right. No, it's like also just like, yeah, we're just like beyond like the fact that like I think a healthy dose of skepticism, like if you like it should have been approached at like a number that was so sort of like outrageous, unless it's just
Yes.
sort of, the confirmation bias was just ripe with some folks. But I do think that like it was sort of interesting how that shook out. Now, I did want to ask beyond just sort of what inspired you to do it, like you definitely like are making these distinctions in the graphics that you post that make distinctions between the idea of a procedural penalty versus a judgment call. And I want you to just maybe explain that a little bit before I just before we go into it.
Yeah. So let me talk about the graphics as a whole, because there's 3 of them that I put out, right? So there's the one graphic which just has all of the penalties, and so it shows penalties against the team and penalties against the team's opponents. So there's team penalties, opponent penalties, and then I create a net penalties, which is team penalties minus opponent penalties. To show which teams are benefiting the most from penalties. The higher your net penalties number is, the higher your net penalties number is, the more the refs have quote unquote helped your team, right? Like the New York Giants right now lead the league with you've got the graphic up.
Right. Yeah, I figured it'd be, if we're going to talk about it, if anyone's watching on video, I pulled it up because I figured that would just make the conversation a little bit easier. And it's interesting. I like looking at it every week. You can already see the little like button because I love seeing it. Yeah.
Yeah. So the top team here, the New York Giants, they've had 54 penalties called on them. Their opponents have had 71 penalties called on them. And so that's a plus 17 net penalties in favor of the Giants. So clearly the Giants are the team that the NFL is trying to help every way that they can. And they don't want anybody to beat the Giants. Conversely, the Ravens have 92 penalties called against them, and their opponents only have 63 called against them for a minus 29 net penalties. Because again, obviously, the NFL hates the Ravens. Like, absolutely, they do not want the Ravens to win anything. Like two-time MVP? Absolutely not. No. John Harbaugh? No. Get that guy out of here. He's a special teams coach. Why would the NFL want him to win anything, right? Like, so
what is interesting is that this holds to the judgment curve too. So it's not just something that you can say, like even like the stuff that's just purely variance. If you wanted to make your NFL rigged arguments, which sure, if you believe that, then go bet on it. Like, because then you have some money to make. But
right, exactly.
So yeah, like I feel like it is interesting that trend does hold to the judgment curve, like to the judgment table rather, though, which I thought was an interesting trend.
Yeah, and I make these, and like the name of these graphics and the way that I post them, I use like incredibly bombastic name. Like I'm trying to make obvious that there is no ref conspiracy here. This is not happening. The refs do not hate your team as a whole. Like specific refs might possibly hate you, but generally speaking, across the NFL, there is no ref conspiracy. The NFL is not pushing one team or the other with their refs and their flags because, again, the Giants are not the golden team, and the Ravens are not the black sheep of the family. It's just not. So I wanted to do all of the penalties to get those numbers, but then I've separated these penalties out into two different buckets, into procedural penalties and judgment call penalties. So procedural penalties are your penalties like your false starts, your 12 men on the field, your delay of game, running out of bounds on a kick, kick out of bounds, stuff like that. You've got the graphic up here. And I post this every week along with it so people know exactly these are the procedural penalties, these are the judgment calls. Procedural penalties are what I generally think every crew is going to call 90% of the time, right? A false start is going to be missed, all right? Every team false starts, every player false starts, everybody's false started and not gotten it called against them, all right? It's generally called against everybody. 12 men on the field is almost always caught, right? Somebody stepping out of bounds and then tackling somebody is almost always caught. These are procedural penalties that, like, these are just you breaking the rules. There's no real judgment call aspect to it. Every ref is going to see these the same. Again, generally speaking.
Right. Like there was the notable missed face mask call at the end of that primetime game a couple weeks ago. But it's also just like
the notable
it happens to every team. It's all luck at that point, like whether it's going to happen sometimes for you.
And that notable missed face mask call was a Ravens player face masking Joe Burrow. Right, so the team that has the most judgment call penalties called on them did not get called for that judgment call penalty. Or wait, do I call that? No, face mask is a
no. That's a procedural penalty.
All right, never mind on that one then.
No, but even so, because they're the team with the most total penalties, and like that luck it's not like that luck's holding over to everything. It's just
like face masks get missed too. Right. Like refs are human. This just happens. So the procedural are basically, you shouldn't do that. Every time you do that, you're going to get flagged. End of story, right? Judgment call penalties are like pass interference or holding, illegal block in the back, stuff like that, where there is a lot more of a judgment call aspect to it. And that might vary quite a bit from one refereeing crew to the next. So I separated those two because anytime you talk about the refs in any manner whatsoever, the conversation will always shift. I posted the first one here, this, not the messed around and found out, but the blessed by the refs one. I posted that the first week and only that. And people were like, well, yeah, but, false start penalties and all of that. Like the refs are jerking us around on not calling pass interference or other stuff. And so I'm like, okay, let's separate these out into these two buckets. And again, once you do that, the goalposts move. So judgment of the refs is my most liked, most quote tweeted, and most commented post of the week almost every week. It gets a lot of traction in Ravens country, which reasonable, honestly, very reasonable.
Yeah, I understand being upset about that. It's just one of those things that if you looked at it on a multi-season basis, I'm sure it wouldn't be one of those things with a lot of correlation when you talk about at least the judgment call stuff, because that's like the definitionally variance, the way I think about it, at least. If you're taking the premise that it's not rigged, then that's almost just, of course, how it's going to go, right?
Yeah. And yeah, I actually did. Somebody asked me about about last year's stats, and I pulled that as well for 2023 for all three of these. And the Giants did not lead the league, and the Ravens did not trail the league. There was some other team that was at the top and bottom, and there were big differences there, even across an entire season. Like right now, we're only 11 weeks in. There's still time for variance to go one way or the other, right? And that's what refereeing is. It's just variance. It's It's just flags being thrown when they see penalties, and it just happens. Sometimes it helps your team, sometimes it hurts your team. Some days they're for you, some days they're against you, and it's just variance. It's just humans doing a hard job, in my opinion. There's no conspiracy here.
I think I couldn't agree more with that. Like I said, when I saw this, I was like so thankful to have the objective data. Now, I was also curious, looking specifically at the procedural penalties, but more broadly, but I think focusing on procedural penalties, you'll probably find a little bit more predictiveness. But had you looked at that at all? Because you look at the top and you see, coaches who are well regarded, quarterbacks who seem to have a strong command of their offense and are able to run things from the line a little bit, and you get into this idea of maybe there is something to the idea of procedural penalties at least being correlated with certain aspects of team quality, whether that is the head coach or the quarterback or other aspects of the team, or just an organization thing, just showing on multiple levels, right?
Right. Yeah. Because I do think that there could very well be a coaching aspect to this. Like, coaches in general are going to teach their teams to play to the edges as much as you can. Like studies have shown that if you change how harshly they're calling false starts, initially there will be a big drop in the amount of false start penalties that are called across the league, but after,
or a spike depending, I guess. Yeah.
Or what?
Or a spike, depending on if they're calling it more aggressively or less aggressively.
Right. Yes. Yeah. So there will be a dip or a spike for a few weeks, 6, 7, 8 weeks, but then it levels back out to its pre-change number, because coaches see exactly how these things are being called, and so they're going to tell their players to jump at this particular moment, right? Like, coaches are smart. They know how to do this. So some coaches are probably worse at teaching that, and some coaches are probably better. I haven't run any sort of anything to see if it's predictive. Procedural penalties, I would find to be far more likely to be predictive than judgment call penalties. I did one time, this was years ago, and I'm a much better coder now. This is probably 3 years ago. I did try to check and see if the amount of penalties against the team was predictive from year to year, and there was a 17 or an R squared of 0.17.
I tried looking at it on the coach level. I was gonna say, I tried looking at it on the coach level once, and I remember the data was I wasn't splitting it out from a procedural and judgment basis, and it was I found a couple coaches specifically had it was I split it out by coach specifically, because I was asking, my thought was it's probably it's probably a situation where very few coaches matter on this curve. But then at the extremes, there might be a couple coaches who are either really poorly prepared for their job or really, really disciplined. And I thought that would be looking at on the individual coach level instead of looking at it on there and saying, okay, is there any coach with a significant sample size of having penalty rates that are lower or higher than average? And that was the way I thought to approach that question. But breaking it down into procedural seems like an even better way to do that. And even maybe on the position coach level too, there's a lot of ways to strip it.
Yeah, positional coaches is going to matter. Also, how long has that coach been in that position teaching those people? How well can you teach this? If you get a brand new positional coach, is that going to change that? If you get 3 new people on your offensive line, is that going to change it? There's just so many confounding variables in football that it's hard to do any work that. It's hard to do work like this that you feel would be predictive or make an impact that you can look at and say, this actually is meaningful for sure.
Right. And that's one of the favorite things I do love about NFL analytics and football analytics and analytics in general is this idea of challenging these conventional notions. Oh, that team doesn't get penalized that much or that team gets penalized a lot, like that has to do with coaching. And while we've acknowledged the judgment aspect of it and the variance that of course is involved in penalties, there also is an aspect of procedural penalties that are relatively avoidable or not. Like some of it, like whether you commit a face mask, sometimes you're grabbing and your hand gets caught in the wrong place, right? Like there's certainly aspects of variance and also like the detection rate of getting caught, because like you said, it's not always going to happen. But at the end of the day, we do believe there probably is an aspect of discipline to this. And like, I wonder if it's just interestingly like correlated with just like offensive like efficiency on a base level due to these ideas of like maybe they're both just like products of something deeper in terms of offensive organization, discipline, strength, and just schematic development in terms of just being on time and being in tune with one another and having strong communication. So there's a lot that goes into it. There's so many confounders. It might all be products of things that are frankly impossible to measure, but it is such a fun problem.
Yeah.
Before we leave, I do want to highlight some of the awesome tools that you have put together that I've made use of, like just sort of in my, trying to, track things going on with the game. And I want to just, I had a couple of them here, at least that I know I've gotten the chance to enjoy. So I'll bring up I think I may have had to open the calculator app first. So this might be a technical difficulties moment, but give me 1 second there.
It opens in a new page.
Right. That's what I forgot about that. And that's why I'm pulling up the new page now. So yeah, there we go. So this, I believe, is, what are we looking at here? Is this the Sneed? No. Yeah, this is Sneed.
Is this what?
Is this the Sneed trade?
No. This is not a real trade.
Okay. I was looking at them like,
these numbers.
I don't remember this trade as the Sneed. Like, what am I looking at here? Like,
no, I just punched in just basic regular numbers. I built this last year, 2023, and when the year flipped, the year variables here did not flip, and so when the season switched, it caused a problem, and so I just, instead of trying to input a real trade, I just like input a random. This isn't a real trade. These are just two teams. These are just random picks that I made. So this particularly is not a real trade. But what this
it shows someone how to use it, right? Because it's got like all the possible iterations of things you could type in and all of that, I guess, was the idea.
Yes, exactly. I wanted to make sure that everything was filled in with multiple years, the commas that you can use. If you don't know the number, you can use a mid-second, mid-third, like is shown here. So I just wanted a random trade that demonstrated all of the things that I wanted it to do.
Okay, yeah, I'm glad you gaslit me a little bit on the trade there. I was thinking, it says Tennessee trades up. I'm like, I don't remember that. Like, I'm being honest. I was racking my brain there, trying to figure out what I was looking at. But that makes a ton of sense. I find this like really useful when I'm trying to visualize the various sort of like ways to look at a trade. There's obviously I wouldn't say like this is like this is honestly a pretty like decent list, like in terms of list, like the main curves I would want to look at. Now also I'd probably try to look at a couple of the other curves that I've just from some of the recent guests I've had on the pod that I think have come up with some cool stuff. But I do think that there's just so much great research in terms of this and trying to put it all in one place so you can get like a composite sort of just read based on not really any one person's methodology, but sort of combining all of them. Sort of gives you a wisdom of the crowd's element to approaching your assessment of these trades.
Yeah. And if you do want to use it to bring up an actual real trade, I have the numbers for the Chiefs trade with Buffalo for Worthy.
Let's do that. That's fun. Yeah.
All right. So trade up team is the Chiefs.
Chiefs trade for Worthy. Trade up team, KC. Where are we at? What were the picks?
Okay, so pick 28, 131, 248.
248. Okay, and
All
that's all
2024.
24. Does it get messed up if you use past years? I had wondered that for like accuracy, but I'd never tried it.
If you use past years,
Like if I put in 2023, would it get confused?
it shouldn't, but it wouldn't give a discount either.
Interesting. Okay. Anyway, like
That's
so then
interesting.
what were the Buffalo picks?
Buffalo got pick 32,
Okay.
95,
95.
and 221.
221. Okay.
All 2024.
Yeah, let's make sure. Future pick discount doesn't matter. QB trade, no. And then we can watch it do its magic. And now we have a graphic.
Chiefs trade for Worthy. So yeah,
pretty fair value, gotta say, on all these.
It was very fair trade. Yeah. It was really good. Like mid sixth to or early six is the best, and mid seven going back is the worst. So everybody agrees this is a solid trade. And that's about as even of a trade as you're ever going to get in the NFL.
Yeah, I think this is one of those things where it's like, if you have like a relatively steeper draft curve, you're going to view the difference between 95 and 131 as pretty minimal. And if you're a team that, embraces, sort of like a more like the picks are more similarly valued, a little bit more uncertain approach, then you might appreciate the Bill side sort of getting another top 100 pick in there.
Yeah, and I forget who they got with it, but he's a good player. He's been playing good snaps for him too. Their pick at 95.
They took Dwayne Carter.
Yeah, DB.
Defensive tackle, interior.
Yeah. So, but yeah, he's gotten solid snaps for him. So this is a really good trade for them.
Absolutely. Let me pull that off, and I think now what we're going to do is just sort of walk through the tools more in theory, than show how each one works. For frankly, because this will become apparent in a second, is you just have so many different ones that to walk through all of them would probably take a little bit. But that's part of why I wanted to make sure to just go through them and just sort of share with any listeners who are interested to just sort of see what is available here. So the first one, the game preview cards app. I know you've posted these online as well, these sorts of game previews. Yeah. Do you want to just sort of explain what goes into those?
So the game preview app, it's actually, do you mind bringing it up? It's just such a good
Yeah, no, I can. It's honestly, it makes a lot more sense and it's easier for you. So I'll do it. That's
the fine. Other ones I'm happy just explaining, but I'm really proud of this one.
No, I don't want to. I'm doing it to show it off because I think it's awesome. So I'm happy to show it. And it's got the color scheme too, and it's got this great information. So I can zoom out a little bit so we can try to get more of it in there.
But so what this graphic does is it provides a matchup between two teams for a given week. It defaults to the current week and to the Thursday night game, or it defaults to the first game of the week. So the Christmas game is a Wednesday game, so it'll default to that. But it shows the day, date, and time of the game. It shows the week of the game. It shows the two teams playing. If it's an international game, or rather, if it's a game that is being played at a neutral stadium, it'll show that at that top label where it says Thursday, November 21st. It would say, sorry, my kid.
That's the first animal appearance on this podcast. That's awesome. That's great.
Go see Mama, buddy. One moment.
Sure. We'll take a pause.
Sorry about that. My kid's going to sleep, but he fights it. So he heard voices in here and came up into.
Oh, I thought that was a puppy. Oh my God, that was a baby.
Nope, that was my son, my 3-year-old.
I'm so sorry.
Oh, no, that's all right. It's all right. He's
That's
he's a good kid.
amazing. No, that's how old is he?
He's 3.
Oh wow, that's
Yep,
awesome.
yep. Almost 4. Be 4 in January. So
No, that's
yeah.
great. That was very cute. No, I enjoyed that. Um,
All right. So back to this graphic. So it's got 2 tables here. The top table here just presents some general information about the teams. So their win-loss record, whether it's home or away, how many rest days they get. This is usually going to be the same, but they're playing on Thursday. Probably next week, Pittsburgh and the Browns, they're probably not going to be playing teams who played on Thursday, so they'll have a rest advantage. Or if you're playing a team off of a bye, the rest days will show 7 versus 14 or 6 versus 7 or 10 versus 7. And so that can matter.
Yeah, I tried pulling up another game, but I made the font so small that it was just straining my eyes to try to try to read it. I was like, I honestly couldn't make out what week I was even clicking. I was like, I'm just gonna abandon ship on that one. But this is really interesting. I mean, I feel like these are a lot of, at least like the stats that I'm thinking about when I'm looking at a game is, okay, like, one, like we're looking at just like basic efficiency stuff, breaking down, just sort of like, like some of the component parts of that. And also like looking at it on like more of a rate basis, and just sort of characterizing play, like late down success rate. One of those things that I think, pretty variance influence, but it's still important to think about, because that actually gives you some signal the other way about a team in terms of maybe how they've been overachieving or underachieving on those fronts. I think there's so much here.
Bottom stat here, the series conversion rate.
I was going to say, I love that stat.
Yeah, that's one. It usually needs some explanation because people aren't too familiar with it. But this is something that Ben Baldwin coded up for the NFL verse. And so it looks at basically, so you start a series on first down, and that series lasts until your next first down, right? Or until you throw an interception, lose the ball in some way, or score a touchdown, right?
Or punt.
So series or punt, right?
It's not losing the ball. I like to be clear that that's voluntarily giving up the ball.
It is, yeah. So series conversion rate is simply the rate at which your offense turns a set of downs into a new set of downs or a touchdown. So the higher your series conversion rate, the more consistently your offense moves the ball. So if you have a high series conversion rate, but also a high explosive play rate, man, you are cooking on all cylinders right there. That's 2018 Chiefs. If you have a high series conversion rate, but an incredibly low explosive play rate, well, now you're looking at the 2024 Chiefs, and it is not cooking on all cylinders, right?
It's very low variance football. I was talking about this with a friend this week, where it's like, if I had Patrick Mahomes, I would probably want to reduce variance on both sides too, and just know that if we need to like turn up the variance in the fourth quarter, that's probably fine because we trust our guy to make the plays. And like that makes sense because you just believe he can out execute anyone on the field and or any other team, and that's going to win you a lot of games. It's a really interesting strategy that sort of prevents a lot of these, I would say, unfortunate losses. Now, I will also admit, like you will have less games like the Colts game that we discussed, but you're going to have a lot of really close games, and that's what this year has shown.
So many really close games.
Yeah. A lot of luck.
Even the games where you feel like you're winning pretty solidly end up being close at the end too. It's just, it's not always the most fun football to watch. Like 2018 Chiefs, even with that god-awful defense that we had, was so much fun. 2019 Chiefs, just so much fun. Like just throwing the ball up, 40-yard bombs, like we had like an average of like 6 plays per drive. It was stupidly low, right? Because it was just bombs, and
that's because they were ending in touchdowns. There weren't a lot of 3 and outs.
Exactly. Yep. And now like all of our scoring drives are 10, 12, 16 play drives, right? Like we get 2 explosive plays a game, and every time we do in our KCSN Discord, we're all like, "Oh my God, an explosive play!" Shooting off, the little GIF rockets and everything. We got 15 yards on a run. Woo! It just doesn't happen.
Like usually still low A dot. The receiver just broke it. Like
exactly. Yeah. Yeah, so it's just so that's anyway that's a really good stat, and just overall the graphic gives a good feel for a matchup, and with the color scheme, the blue and the green and purple color scheme, you can kind of immediately see which team has the advantage and on which side of the ball.
I pulled up the main page again, but yeah, the what is that, the 538 theme or whatever is very sort of helpful in terms of making those sort of like easy to read, like on the eye, like sort of distinctions between like the Browns one that was up before. Let me see if I can get it up again. You can sort of very easily see like, oh yeah, that's not a good team.
Right.
So yeah, that's right here. So it's like, yeah, like that's, you don't look at this and go, oh yeah, like that Browns offense, that's really scaring me about but although the pass rate is really incredible to see.
Yeah, that pass rate that's an interesting stat, because like all of the others, like the more green it is, the better for the team. The more purple it is, the worse for the team. But pass rate is descriptive, but not like, you can have a low pass rate and still be a really good team, and you can have a very high pass rate, such as the number one pass rate in the league. Like you pass the highest in the league, and just be a terrible team, right? Like, so that's right. One that just doesn't fit itself quite so neatly into the color scheme of being good, bad. But
right, but it is descriptive and it is helpful. Yeah, exactly. And it's helpful, like when you're thinking about a matchup. I know like that's like certainly something that I'm like, what I'm trying to think about is just like, what kind of like style of game is this going to be?
Yep.
So it certainly deserves inclusion in this graphic, but it's definitely fair to point out that it's not quite the same kind of metric as some of the more evaluative metrics that show up here.
Well,
so
that's the newest graphic, and just put it out a couple of weeks ago, and like I said, I'm really proud of this one. So
no, I'm glad to be able to show it off. I know I used the team builder metric a little bit this spring when free agency was approaching, and I was sort of mapping out different ideas for what I thought would make sense for the Jets, just on a roster basis. And it was fun. It was interesting, and I thought that was a really helpful tool. The schedules tool as well I thought was great. So yeah, do you want to talk a little bit about this?
Yeah, so the Team Builder app, it works pretty well. It's not perfect. I probably can't make it perfect, but it works well enough. I'll probably just leave it alone. But it allows you to basically build a 53-man roster by position. So you get to add whatever players you want, subtract whatever players you want, and it puts it into a pretty graphic for you, a little pretty table for you, and which you can download. So it gives you like a 53-man option version, but it also gives you a depth chart version. And so you can see, okay, here's my left cornerback, right cornerback, slot cornerbacks, running back 1, 2, 3, fullback. And so it kind of shows a depth chart instead of the just the roster. But both of them are pretty cool. Both of them work pretty well. And it allows you to add any players that you want. Like if you just want to come up with a brand new player for some reason, just, Deion Sanders is now on my team. You can just add a player. So it's pretty cool.
That's pretty cool. I mean, hold on, I'm going to try to add Deion to the Chiefs right now because you guys need some secondary help.
We truly do. Oh my God.
So yeah, no, problem solved.
Boom, there he is. Yep, we're good. Cut anybody.
Yeah, so we just fixed the Chiefs. You're welcome.
Thank you. Three-peat incoming.
No, that's awesome. I just wanted to show the ease of use there. But yeah, no, that's a great tool. And then you have. Sorry.
This matters more on the depth chart version than this version, but you can also you can delete any of those names. And like if you wanted to go up to quarterbacks here and delete Carson Wentz, just click on his name and hit delete.
I was going to say, what are you about to do to the Chiefs?
So if you do that and then you just jump back into the quarterback section there, if you jump back in to add a new quarterback.
Yeah, sure.
Right there. the names that you've deleted, they show up they show up immediately right there. So you can just click Carson Wentz to add them right back. So on the depth chart, like wide receivers, there's no data set that has receivers as listed as X receiver, Y receiver, slot receiver. And so I just pull receivers from ESPN's rosters, and the first receiver that shows up is your X receiver, the second receiver is the Y, and the third is the slot. So like Justin Watson is not in any way our slot receiver, right? That's going to be Xavier Worthy. So you can delete him from the receivers and add him to slot. You can just move these around. You can change who shows up first on the receivers page. You can just change how it looks entirely. Like I don't even know who Jaron Hayek is. He's the guy we just added to our practice squad this week, actually.
No, I took the privilege of cutting Sky Moore. I wanted to be the first to do it.
I appreciate that, honestly. He has 0 catches for 0. We have two offensive linemen with more catches than Sky Moore has on the season.
That's an amazing stat, actually. I'm glad
one of them has a touchdown.
To introduce that one. That's unbelievable.
Yep.
And it's amazing, like some of the like really premium draft assets that have been used on weapons that from a path that just hasn't worked out, and yet things are fine. Like it would be better should those picks have panned out. And I hope Worthy isn't added to that list, but it is just kind of amazing to sort of look at that and go, wow, most teams really would have struggled if they had missed on this many premium picks, especially when you're talking about their weapons, because that means you're just throwing more assets at it, and that's got to come from somewhere.
Yep. Yeah, it's hard to see players just not succeed, especially when you drafted them higher, and to see players drafted at or below their pick or at a pick that we traded back from, succeeding in the NFL, and the player that we picked not. It's just it's rough. It's harsh. But that's life. The other one up there is the Team Schedules app. It just creates a cell phone background image of your team schedule. Looks pretty. It was one of my first graphics when I switched from Python to R, actually. And so it's just fun to build. These other apps here, the Shiny Apps Historical, so all of them relied on the participation data that the NFL Next Gen Stats division had available on their API. They had a whole bunch of participation data that was available. And so the NFL verse got that from their API and used it successfully, no problem, for 2 years until week 15 of last year, when they shut it down for all but primetime games. And this year, they just removed access to it entirely. So
reasons that now are clear with the release of NFL Pro is we want you to buy our product, but at the time, it just felt malicious, frankly.
Yeah, and in the middle of a season, too.
Yeah.
Like, they removed it in the middle of like, if it had just disappeared at the beginning of this season, we'd be like, okay, I mean, that sucks, but also they dropped NFL Pro, so I guess that makes sense. But no, they did it in the middle of a season, just no warning, no anything. This data is no longer available. So all of these 3 apps relied on that. Like I say here, I just updated this actually. They're no longer useful for current games, but I haven't had the heart to delete them yet.
That's so understandable, honestly. And maybe in some world we get, if not the exact information, then maybe, the detailed information that's available through one of these other data providers, they decide to share it with NFL Verse, and we end up with maybe someone else's version of some of the similar participation data. So all is not necessarily lost either.
If anybody knows a source where I can just get the 22 players that were on the field for every single play, I would really appreciate that. I would just really appreciate that. Hit me up on Twitter, Blue Sky, whatever you want. Just just send me that data, please. I'm begging you.
No, I certainly I certainly agree with that. It was it was a sad thing to see the data go. I think this is a good moment for us to wrap up. I want to thank you so much for coming on today, for talking about all the different tools that you've built and stats that you've more or less created.
Yeah.
Not to just throw in one last sort of theocratic reference there, but no, I do really appreciate all the work that you do. I love following it on Twitter, and I just wanted to, I'm glad I had the opportunity to just talk about it with you in a little bit more detail and figure out, a little bit maybe how the sausage was made with some of it, and also just get into the nitty gritty of some of these stats. So thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Yep. And thank you everyone for listening. This has been the Michigan Sports Analytics Podcast, and we will see you next week.